Welcome to First Mover, your first global look at today's action in the Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital asset space. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and joining me are my co-hosts, CoinDesk Managing Editor of Global Capital Markets, Lewitinn, and Managing Director of International Content, Emily Parker. Good morning, you two. It is a bloodbath out there.
Yeah, how about that?
How about that? All right, checking in on Bitcoin right now, trading at 32,506 or 600 or so. Bitcoin is down over 25% over the past 24 hours, and checking in on the CoinDesk Ether price ETX index right now at 2170. ETH is also taking a dive, 36% down over the past 24 hours. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as the leader in crypto news, events, and data. Wow, Lawrence, welcome back, first of all. But what is going on with the crypto markets? Yeah. Well, look, obviously in Bitcoin, all these other currencies losing about a third of its value over the past month, if not the past few days. And right now, Bitcoin's is well over its 100-day moving average, which was 53,800. Boy, those were the great days. And it's now testing the 200-day moving average, which is about 39,000, a little under 40,000, according to Umcar-Godboli. And that hasn't happened in over a year, when it was trading around $8,000. We had massive liquidations in Bitcoin, but it's still about a fifth of what it was back in April in terms of liquidations. It was $3 billion in liquidations overnight, and crypto liquidations, half were Bitcoin. So the bottom line is, the other thing, 34,000, that's the next level we're all watching as a support level. It's about 50% below all-time highs. So the bottom line is, if you're a buyer, the good news, plenty of sellers. Bad news, plenty of sellers. Plenty of sellers out there. And I did see Umcar's reporting that there were several inflows of coins, especially Bitcoin, onto exchanges like Binance, and which means a lot of retail investors are trying to sell. So, Emily, also there's news out there that China is cracking down on Bitcoin. Maybe you could dispel a bit about what that story is all about, because this isn't new, correct?
Exactly. This is not new. China has always maintained a certain skepticism and wariness towards cryptocurrency. So I'm still trying to tease out exactly what just happened, but it looks on the surface like it's mostly a reiteration of China's previous policies. Now, China is very complicated. There's always a difference between what China says and what actually happens in China. China still does have an active crypto trading market, despite a lot of warning signals from the government. But I think the question to pay attention to is, why is China amping this up now? Why is China reiterating this warning now? And I think the reason is that there are a lot of newcomers coming into the Chinese crypto market, as there are all over the world, and they're buying things like, dog-themed meme coins like sheep coin, and the Chinese government is nervous about that. They're nervous about new investors losing money and potentially going and complaining to the government about it. And so I think this is a warning for the US as well, because when you have a lot of new investors coming into the market and buying tokens that they don't totally understand, regulators may very well step in.
Yeah, well, we do have regulators in the United States also raising red flags about the volatility. Well, our first guest served as an advisor at the International Monetary Fund and as a director at the New York Federal Reserve. He specializes in researching financial asset pricing and anomalies, global monetary policy, and political economy. Joining us now is Benson Durham, partner and head of global policy at Cornerstone Macro. Welcome, Benson.
Great to be here.
All right, Benson, straight off the bat, your outlook on Bitcoin and amid this price decline, what's your assessment?
It is, as you put it, a bloodbath this morning. So it's not necessarily a propitious time to come on and talk about it. But I think anyone who's been involved in these markets knows to keep their hands and feet inside the ride, right? And, volatility has picked up maybe a little bit. But arguably lately, it's not, this is not 2015, 2016. So on a daily basis, we are just still not, kind of at the levels of kind of volatility that we've seen, kind of in the past. And as you mentioned, Bitcoin is off maybe 40% from its highs. That's an uncomfortable drawdown, to be sure, but it has been worse. So I think the maximum drawdown over the history of trading is something like 2.5 times. So I think investors who have again been in these markets are kind of are braced for this type of pretty extreme price action. So it's not necessarily a big surprise.
And Benson, all eyes are on the FOMC minutes that will be released today from their April meeting, from the Fed's April meeting, to find out if the Fed intends to maintain easy monetary policy. What will you be watching out for?
Well, I think we'll be watching out for more of the same, right? I mean, I think in all of our conversations with clients, investors are, express a lot of worry about inflation, right? It's that's the top 3 topics: inflation, 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 in almost every discussion we have with clients. So obviously, I think we'll be looking in the minutes for any kind of clues about, kind of how the Fed is viewing their outlook in that regard, to be sure. But I think, as the chair does in his press conferences and as in the minutes always keep emphasizing, I think that they're got a level head about it, pretty zen about the data. And when Chair Powell is asked, he emphasizes 3 things on the inflation outlook. One is base effects. Of course, last week's report was pretty scary, but kind of starting from a low base of inflation, and you had pandemic effects. The second is bottlenecks. The recovery is asynchronous, not just globally, but some sectors are coming online quicker than others in this country, and that means there will be bottlenecks and kind of going forward as we work through this. But the third anchor, I think is extremely important, is inflation expectations actually remain pretty well anchored. So when we look at the bond market, we don't necessarily see signs of runaway inflation, or that investors on balance are particularly worried about it. And I think we'll see some of that reiterated in the minutes later this afternoon.
Morning, Benson. With this current sell-off, do you think we'll see fewer institutions getting into crypto? It's started to seem to cool down over the past few weeks, but are they reconsidering Bitcoin as an inflation hedge? Does it become less of a disruptor to the financial system, or are they buying the dip?
Well, look, I would emphasize, maybe a couple things here. One, I think there's very little that we can say about Bitcoin or either any kind of digital currency and its inflation hedging capabilities. I mean, we don't have hardly any. We only have 10 years of data, and as an economist trained at a central bank, I would be loath to make strong conclusions based on that short a span of time. But I think also investors realize that just because maybe Bitcoin is not an inflation hedge per se, it's pretty uncorrelated with other assets. And so one thing I would like to stress is that although volatility is high, what really matters for investors and what really matters for broader asset allocation is Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies' correlation with other assets and their ability to actually kind of lower overall portfolio volatility. And so far, we haven't seen any cracks in that thesis. I mean, the story is more nuanced. But I think maybe in the short run, you could see outflows and less enthusiasm. But I think longer run investors are kind of more likely to hang in there through this.
Good morning, Benson. While we're talking about central bank and monetary policy, what do you think are the chances of the U.S. issuing its own digital dollar? And do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I don't think anytime soon, right? So when Chair Powell is asked about it, he gives pretty even answers, to be sure. I mean, I think there's a lot to work through, especially in this country, given the, kind of status of the dollar as a so-called global reserve currency, to be sure. So, that there's that consideration. And I think, look, there's, as far as what do I think about it, I think there's pluses and minuses, right? I mean, I think there's a certain value in digital currencies, in part because, we're at the zero lower bound, and that is a real problem. So, any kind of tool which might help the Federal Reserve, kind of get around that fundamental problem that we have would be helpful. There's also the issue of the unbanked. And so there's certain issues there which are, from a redistribution context are very good. But obviously there are worries about, it connotes more government involvement. And, there's also the risk of, cybersecurity, which, kind of already, if you ask central bankers, is a pretty big nightmare. So look, I mean, I think it's definitely something that we should be thinking about and working through, and very serious economists are thinking about it, all around the world. This is something that dozens of central banks are thinking through, but I think it will kind of definitely take some time to work through the details, to be sure.
Just on the digital dollar question, if China, for example, is racing ahead with its own digital currency, and then you have all these other countries around the world having digital currencies, can the U.S. survive without a digital dollar? Can it remain competitive if everybody else is trading directly via digital currencies?
Oh, well, if you take that to its by assumption to the extreme, I think yes, of course. I also wouldn't deny that kind of in the U.S., for example, there's the fact that other central banks are looking into it, kind of makes the Fed kind of more apt to consider it as a kind of a long run policy tool. So no, I think that is a risk, right? It is definitely a risk in terms of so-called dollar hegemony going forward, to be sure.
All right. Benson, thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate your insights.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. That was Cornerstone Macro Partner and Head of Global Policy, Benson Durham. Coming up, checking in on Asia and markets analysis with U.S.-based crypto exchange CoinZoom.
We are witnessing the greatest paradigm shift in finance in modern history. Join thousands of newsmakers and influencers talking the future of money at Consensus by CoinDesk. A live virtual experience of leaders, changemakers, virtual reality meetups, keynotes from Ray Dalio, Gary Vaynerchuk, and much more. Get an up-close look at the boom in crypto, the surge of institutional investment in Bitcoin, NFT mania, the breakneck innovation in decentralized finance, and the coming disruption from central bank digital currencies. Join us May 24th to May 27th for Consensus by CoinDesk.
Time now for the daily forecast, an update on what's happening in the Asia crypto markets. Here's Angie Lau of Forecast News.
Welcome to the Daily Forecast, May 19th, 2021. I'm Angie Lau, Editor-in-Chief of Forecast News. Let's get you up to speed from Asia to the world. Asia leading a crypto markets correction as many key coins take a nosedive today during Asian trading hours. Bitcoin dropping below 40,000 for the first time since February 8th, when Tesla's $1.5 billion Bitcoin purchase hit the airwaves. It's closing at just over $40,000 at the end of the Hong Kong trading day, 4 p.m. local time. Ethereum down a little over 14%, closing below 3,000, and a similar scene across the top 10 in crypto. Cardano and BNB, some of the day's biggest losers, but not alone in today's Bloody Wednesday. So let's get some context. What is behind all of this? John DeVette is Chief Investment Officer of ZeroCap, a digital asset firm in Australia. He believes these bearish market moves are hype-driven.
When you've got Dogecoin pumping through highs and meme coins coming out left, right, and center, there has to be a bit of an exit valve. And unfortunately, you do tend to get that filtrating into the rest of the market.
In China, this news also weighing on sentiment. China is sending another warning to those who invest in cryptocurrencies against speculative trading. The country also reiterating that banks and online payment platforms cannot provide services related to cryptocurrency transactions. Semi-government sponsored groups representing the industry, including the China Internet Finance Association, issued a statement saying in part that internet platform corporate members should not provide services for virtual currency-related businesses. So how to read into all of this? Well, Forecast spoke to China-based industry veterans. Fan Long, co-founder of Conflux, a public blockchain endorsed by the Shanghai government, says warnings like these are not new from the government and that they shouldn't stoke fear.
It's also kind of consistent with what Chinese government keeps doing, which is on one hand, they are not very happy about the speculative nature of this technology, the blockchain, the crypto market. But on the other hand, Chinese government are really ready to invest on the blockchain technology.
China's stance on cryptocurrency is one thing, but when it comes to embracing blockchain technology, it's full steam ahead. Just ask public blockchain network Nervos. It announced the launch of a $50 million fund with China Merchants Bank. This is a move the company says will boost the development of the public blockchain ecosystem in China. Nor does mining appear to be slowing down either, at least not everywhere in the country. New York Stock Exchange traded SOS Limited, based in Qingdao, China, reporting the company has put over 6,000 new mining rigs into operation. That includes nearly 600 Ethereum rigs. Now, the company's CEO says he expects mining to be an important growth driver of the business for 2021. This as Inner Mongolia's government, which essentially shut down crypto mining earlier this year in an effort to achieve new carbon reduction goals, has set up reporting platforms for those who might not be following the rules. We wanted to get a better understanding of the real story from inside China. We spoke to Bitdeer Mining's Leo Li, who says hash rates have shifted outside of China, but he sees the industry is still performing well within the country.
Over 50% of this hash rate coming from Chinese market, Chinese mining farms. So such a ban in China, in Mongolia, won't have a big effect on this industry in Chinese mining farms.
And that's the Daily Forecast. I'm Angie Lau. Until next time.
The Crypto Markets Update is presented by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
Time for our live look on Bitcoin. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XBX index is currently at 33,400 and change. We're seeing Bitcoin fall about 23% over the past 24 hours. And the CoinDesk Ether price ETX index is trading at 2247. It's down about 33% over the past 24 hours. And joining us to discuss the crypto markets is Todd Crosland, CEO of CoinZoom, a US-based crypto exchange. So, Todd, what a day to come onto the show. We're seeing a lot of red out there. Is this a buying opportunity, or can we fall a little further?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting market for sure. You know, we're up about $4,000 the last 3 or 4 minutes, so we'll have to see where the bottom is. But I think that, long term, that this could be a really great buying opportunity. That we'll look back in 6-12 months that this was a great entry point for the market.
Morning, Todd. Are you nervous a little bit, or a lot of it, that some of the sell-off seems to be as much narrative driven on the way down as it was on the way up? Does it worry, a partner like Visa?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at the structural changes that we're seeing, with digital assets, and just the revolutionary way that it's affecting, traditional finance and banking, I think, our partner Visa, I think, has wholly embraced digital assets going forward. I mean, there's going to be some bumps and bruises along the way, but we think long term, in 1, 2, 3, 4 years from now, we'll look back at a great opportunity to enter the market at these levels.
Todd, we hear a lot about meme coins. Do you think that's going to start slowing down now, or are you guys, for instance, listing any on CoinZoom?
So we haven't yet. I mean, we get lots of investor demand. We're cautious about the coins we list. One, we want to make sure they're not, classified as a security. And, we're really looking out for, not just short-term trading volume for the exchange, but more, what's best for investors. I mean, if there'll be a reckoning in a lot of these assets. And there are certain assets that we are really confident will do well. And then there's others that we know, will disappear in a year or 6 months.
There's been some news out of China over the past couple days. How important do you think the China market is on impacting the global Bitcoin price?
Well, I mean, there's obviously headline risk in this market, as you mentioned, and it's kind of more of the same. I mean, how many times have we heard this out of China? And so I think there's some knee-jerk reactions when we hear these pronouncements or warnings. But I think overall, Bitcoin and the digital asset market, has a life of its own, and I think eventually will be less prone to headline risk and less volatile as well.
I wonder if you can share any metrics on CoinZoom. Are you seeing a lot of activity, selling pressure on CoinZoom? A lot of people putting on coins onto the exchanges versus previously when people were holding?
Yeah, we've seen more pressure pressure across the board. Obviously, we have some gold stable coins, and then, stable coins are doing great today. Lots of volume going into those. And then, there are a few of the coins that are less volatile. We have a USG, which is a gold-backed coin as well, that's doing well. So I think that what we've seen is, lots of selling pressure in Ether especially, and, as well as Bitcoin, but we're seeing lots of buying in Bitcoin at these levels right now.
All right. Todd, thanks for joining us and offering a little analysis on the crypto markets.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. That was CoinZoom CEO Todd Crosland. Coming up, Beeple joins us to talk about transforming the art world and a global policy and regulation update with CoinDesk's Nick Day. Welcome back. Time to check in with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who is also the editor of CoinDesk's The State of Crypto newsletter. Good morning, Nick. So we have news that from the new Office of the Comptroller, the currency chief, he's signaling greater caution around cryptos. We see the price declines. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so later today at around 10 a.m., Acting Comptroller Michael Hsu, who just recently took office last week, will tell Congress that he's initiating a review of all of the crypto-related actions conducted over the last year under former Acting Comptroller Brian Brooks, who's now at Binance US as its new CEO. This seems to be part of a kind of a standard. New person comes in, takes a look at all pending matters, but he did hint at some specific areas, noting that quoting or saying that there was a lack of stakeholder input into some of these interpretive guidance letters that were issued last year, but basically said banks can interact with the cryptocurrency industry, that cryptocurrency companies can get trust charters. So it's we're going to be keeping an eye on what exactly this review looks like and what it concludes.
Nick, who were the stakeholders that weren't giving input?
So most likely it would be the FDIC and the Fed. Both of those agencies are now, publishing requests for information or proposals asking for public input about how they would interact with the cryptocurrency industry. But whatever, all the letters from last year basically came out without those two entities' input, it would appear. So, it's basically you have one of the three main federal bank regulators kind of coming out and doing all this without support from the other two, which could be, I think, maybe one of the issues here.
Nick, do you think it's significant that this is happening now, or is this part of kind of a longer trend that's been in the making for a while?
I think the fact that this is a new presidency kind of meant this would have been inevitable. So Michael Hsu just took office the other week. This is going to be his first public testimony in front of Congress. He's going to be speaking to a Democratic Congress, some of whose members have, already raised concerns about the actions that Brian Brooks conducted during his tenure. So I don't think this is much. It shouldn't be much of a surprise. Mr. Su also did say quite a bit about fintechs, and he acknowledged that fintech companies are here to stay. That not giving these companies charters or allowing them access wouldn't really solve anything. So I don't think it's really it's not a glaring red flag, but it is definitely worth keeping an eye on.
All right, thanks, Nick, for the update.
Thank you.
All right, that was CoinDesk Managing Editor of Global Policy and Regulation, Nick Day.
The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
Our next guest embodies the peak of the non-fungible token boom, auctioning off an NFT at Christie's for almost $70 million. It is the third most expensive piece of art sold by a living artist. He is now partnering with graphics company Otoy and the Render blockchain network to shape the future of digital art. Joining us now is the artist Beeple and Jules Urabak, CEO of Render. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, how's it going? How we doing this morning? How's everybody feeling?
Don't ask those investors.
I can't help but notice that things are down here. I got a lot of crap when
your Ethereum must be going up.
Money into cash.
Your Ethereum is higher than it used to be, though. But
yeah, where we go? What are we doing here? I thought everything was that going up in the crypto world.
Was that you selling?
Yeah, was that you selling?
Yeah, no, this was not me selling. So full disclosure here. I sold into cash, then I went back and bought back into ETH, and now what's going on here, guys? What are we doing? I thought we were all diamond hands everywhere.
Well, we'll see. Beeple, so you are the it man when it comes to NFTs. When you were last on the show, you said you want to reinvest the $70 million you earned into art, and you've chosen to partner with Render and Otoy. So tell us about your collaboration right now.
Yeah, so Otoy is something, I've been working with Jules for the last 8 years. It's been a really long time, and it's something that I use Octane every day. It's the software that I use to render the pictures that I do with me along with, tens of thousands of other artists. And so what we're doing with Render here is really wanting to push forward, what's possible with NFTs in terms of their archivability and other ways that they can be used to render out different sort of assets, sort of after the fact, and really add more utility to NFTs in general.
Yeah, Jules, you want to shape the future of art. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I think we want to start by providing a completely green platform for NFTs. There's a lot of angst around the environmental impact. So with Render, NFTs are minted in such a way that there's actually zero environmental impact cost. And the blockchain that Render runs on is proof of render, also the greenest possible blockchain technology. So that's important. And I think Mike and I, as we're looking at the NFT space for the last few months, we want to invest technologically and as artists and creators into a system that has this longevity. That's why these archives are important, so that there is organization around the NFT space. There's a lot of stuff where NFTs disappear, the files aren't stored correctly on the internet. All of that is solved with the tools we're creating. And like with the rendering software itself that we've built over these years, we want to make sure that it's democratized and that everybody has access to a very artist-friendly ecosystem for the long term.
This is a question for Micah. You were kind of like the top of the NFT market, but there's been a ton of NFTs since then. What is the most ridiculous NFT that you've seen so far?
The most ridiculous? I don't know.
I know it's the competition is fierce.
Name names. Okay, I think there's. I rather focus on the things that are really good uses of NFTs. I think Gary Vee just came out with a project that was really, really cool, and it did really, really well. And I think you're going to start to see more use cases like that are beyond digital art, because again, that's where this thing sort of started with, but that's not remotely sort of the end of the road for NFTs. There's so much around utility with these things that I think we've just absolutely barely begun to scratch the surface with that.
So speaking of Gary Vee, we actually had him on the show yesterday, and we talked a little bit about his NFT. And a topic that came up is this idea of influencer culture and how it's kind of shaping the NFT market. And I think we talked about this a little bit with you too. You know, NFTs in theory are supposed to democratize the art market, but actually what's happening is that you're having celebrities coming in, or influencers, or people who already have huge social media networks, and often they get preferential treatment from the platforms. You know, either they have a direct connection with one of these NFT platforms, or the platforms actually give them preferential placement on the sites. I mean, do you think this is a problem? Like, do you think that we are sort of seeing just a repetition of what's happening in our current social media environment, where the people who are already very well placed are just going to succeed, and the newer, lesser known artists are going to kind of have a much harder time making their work known?
I think there will be some level of democratization with NFTs in terms of, you know, sort of empowering people who did not have a platform before to you know, sort of gain an audience. But I think it is going to be something that everybody sort of uses, from celebrities down to people who, you know, don't have a huge following. So I don't know that it's going to just magically fix everything, because part of the thing with NFTs is they don't really sort of, like, you have to have like kind of a built-in audience. Just because you made something an NFT doesn't mean somebody's automatically just going to buy it. I had, you know, to be quite honest, millions of followers before I sold this. And so that's kind of what put me in a position to sell that. So I think it's one of these things where I think it will help. It's not a magic bullet, though.
Welcome back, people, of course. And Jules, welcome to our show. But one question I have is the physical art market. Are they getting more involved in NFTs? Are they getting more receptive? Is there any place for them? Or is this just going to be mostly a digital-only business?
No, I do not think it's going to remotely be a digital-only business. And that's one of the things that I've been working with Jules is these holographic displays. I think there's a massive, massive room around, you know, pushing forward the digital displays to make these things, you know, with digital art even more sort of accessible for people who are maybe a little sort of, you know, on the fence about NFTs. So I think I think you're going to see sort of a merging of these two markets, with traditional art sort of adding NFTs to add more value to that and sort of prove provenance in a more, you know, concrete way. And I think you're going to see digital art, you know, utilizing things, the latest sort of technology to show digital art in, you know, more just interesting way than sort of just like, okay, here's this thing I bought on my phone. And that's where I think with Otoy, that's something that I'm really, really excited about.
So, Jules, how does Render get involved in that kind of a market in the physical space?
So it's a great question. And to Mike's point, you know, we're partnered with a company called Lightfield Lab. They are building these holographic display panels. They did a 30 million round. Investors include Samsung and others. And just yesterday, Google at I/O showed this semi-holographic display panel for communications. That is the starting point for the entire industry moving towards holographic display panels. Lightfield Lab is way ahead. It's just a massive amount of pixels and rays. And what you get out of it is like the Star Trek holodeck. That's the inspiration for the company and how the art looks. It just will look real, even though it'll be digitally created, but it'll be in a real frame. And I think that is the future, not just of physical art, but many forms of media.
Beeple, what do you think of the critics who say the first 5,000 days NFT that you sold for $70 million could disappear if the website hosting the file goes bust? Have you seen those critics?
I've seen that. It's one of these things where there's no guarantees around anything, but it's sort of like it is the best sort of thing we have right now. And it's if that goes bust, a lot of things have went bust, and we've got a lot of problems. So it's decentralized file storage, and I think it's something where, well, nothing is impossible. That seems quite unlikely. And I think it's one of those things where that's where Render, I think, can come in and sort of help with archiving things. And I think it comes down to, if people want to keep things and if things still hold value, people will find ways to keep those things around. We have paintings that are hundreds of thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds of years old. And those things, you know, again, if they have value to people and they have an emotional connection to people, they'll stick around. And that's, again, where I think Render could really help with the archiving aspects of this.
Jules, do you have a follow-up in terms of the tech side?
Yeah, I mean, well, to Mike's point, I mean, preservation is it is important. Render can actually take existing NFTs like Mike Christie's piece, and because it's a blockchain, there's redundancy. And of course, as we're minting new NFTs, file storage is permanent. There's 3 different backups. It's all decentralized. There's a lot of things that I think in the early days of NFTs that can be fixed. Render solving all those problems, and it can even retroactively shore up previous NFTs. And it's a really amazing system. So artists, I think, are going to be covered with this kind of tech going forward.
All right. Thank you, Beeple and Jules, for joining us. Congratulations and good luck on your new platform.
Thank you.
All right, that was the artist Beeple and Render CEO Jules Urbach. Time now to check in with Crypto Twitter with our tweet of the day. This one from Nick Carter, who is a CoinDesk columnist and partner at Castle Island Ventures, tweeting, "Can't be anything worse than FOMOing, fear of missing out, into Bitcoin for the memes and then becoming a forced holder due to a sell-off, and all the Bitcoiners hate you now." It's a tough world out there. Control those emotions. That's it for First Mover. Thank you, Emily Parker and Lawrence Lewitinn. I'm your host, Christine Lee. I'll be back live at 3 p.m. with All About Bitcoin. Coming up at 10:30 is Coin Toss, and stick around at noon for The Hash. You're watching CoinDesk TV.